So they had a flag. This said the flag over to the but that's on the wall. So really, yeah. That's
We're good.
All right, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. I have 7:01, so even the stragglers have gotten in here by now. And my name is Jacob McCormick. Thanks for being here. I'm your photo archivist here at the State Capitol. I'm joined by Brian Page, your Capitol Registrar. We're going to talk to you tonight about our new collections acquisitions over the last year or two or three or four. We've never done this before, so we stretched that year or so boundary a little bit. Before we dive in, I want to plug next month's presentation, if this is going to cooperate. Next month's presentation, and that is Battle Flag. So we're going to, Cam and May are going to be looking at, we have a heckler in the crowd, and they're going to be looking at and talking about conserving the Battle Flag collection. So I think you'll be getting a tour of the lab across the way and getting to see some action on one of the Battle Flags they're working on. So that'll be very exciting. That's February 18th. They're right here at Heritage Hall. So hopefully you can join us for that. But tonight, again, we're going to be talking about collections and a small collections team around here at the Capitol, but we try to remain steadfast in finding new and exciting things that relate to the building. And we don't have necessarily anything concrete. It sort of is when we see something, does it speak to us? Does it speak to the building? Does it speak to the people that worked here? Does it speak to the physical building? That's sort of our collecting focus and our collecting development priorities. So all these things tonight relate to the Capitol in some way or to its people. And I am going to dive right in with our first category. And that's my domain, which is photographs. So one large collection that I've been working on for a few years now is the House of Representatives, or the Legislative Photographic Collection. So the House and the Senate, since the mid-1970s, of each caucus, so the Republicans and Democrats in each the House and the Senate, 4 total groups, have had their own either part-time or full-time photographers since the mid-1970s, staff photographers. That means that there were an immense amount of photos produced, and presumably that means there is a massive archive sitting somewhere. That's what we thought anyway, going into this. That's what we hoped going into this. Well, it turns out that is true in the House of Representatives, and we've been able to work out an agreement and a plan and a policy in which we received sort of a bulk donation of most of the archive going back to the mid-1970s. And then as time progresses, we will keep getting updates with all the new things as the years pass. So we can keep both preserving this collection and making it accessible and available to the public. So to give an idea of what this entails, this started with the House Republican photographer Mike Quillinan, who's pictured with his big camera up in the corner there. He's been on the job for more than 40 years in this position, which means that he has taken and retained quite a mass of photographs in his 40 years. And it started with him raising the question of, how do I preserve this massive archive that I have? And we're grateful and glad that he asked that question and that we could step in and help. And that is beneficial to us and to him and to the House of Representatives, as it so turns out. So Mike ends up bringing piles of things over to me periodically for a long while. They get slowly processed. So we get through most of the House Republican material, and it turns out with the physical material and the digital material, we have 9 boxes of physical photographic archives from the House Republicans. These boxes are what I'm talking about for the House Republicans. And get this, they go digital around 2002. So since 2002, the last not quite 25 years, we have just north of 103,000 digital photo files from the House Republicans alone, documenting the members, a little bit of the building, mostly the members. So we're talking, as you see here on the screen, group shots, individual shots, floor shots of impassioned speeches. These were used for communications, publicity purposes to go out to constituents. So that is, for the most part, what we see in these photos. The House Democratic side, which we've also since started taking in some of that material, the House Dems, that collection spans more than 20 boxes of physical material. Again, these kind of boxes, they had more of the earlier stuff still on hand in the filing cabinet. So that was exciting for us. And then their digital has not been processed yet, but there are dozens to scores of CDs of photos and hard drives that have not been received yet. And we're talking probably tens of thousands, if not north of 100,000 photos for the House Democrats as well. So this is one half of the building. We are in the early stages of figuring out what the Senate still has, although we already know from discussions that there is far less for the Senate side of the building. I attribute that to the fact that the Senate moved office buildings in the mid-2010s and things hit the dumpster, or, who knows what happened to them. Unfortunately, that means that we're going to have probably some good digital stuff from the last 25 years or so, but not so much the early stuff. And most of these physical materials are contact sheets, negatives, prints, the whole deal. So it allows us to, again, preserve this great collection and make them accessible. So that's the House photo collection, which is very exciting. The House Republicans collection is online with its finding aid, which you can see the cover sheet of on the screen. Almost none of it is digitized. We're working on sort of a policy that if you see something in the finding aid, you can come in and look at the box. I can look at the box for you. If you want something, we'll scan that thing or that folder for you. We're not going to scan 9 boxes all right now. I am simply one person and that would take forever. So that's sort of the policy we're working with right now. I'm going to turn things over to Brian next to talk about our next sort of category and donor.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear us okay? Awesome. So I am Brian Page. I'm our... Now people online can hear me too. I'm Brian Page. I'm our Capitol registrar. So I take care of all the artifacts, physical stuff, as well as some of our archival materials as well. And I'm going to apologize. I have a lot to say about this stuff, so I'm going to read a lot of this. But our first major acquisition I want to talk about from 2024 was from this happy gentleman right here. This is Charles Chip Rogers III. In May of 2024, we received an email to our General Capital Commission inbox from a gentleman named Charles Rogers, or Chip for short. Chip explained that he had worked for the Michigan House of Representatives from 1965 to 1976 under Clerk of the House Norman Filio and later for Speaker of the House Bobby Krim. During this time with the House, Chip explained that he had received some items that he may be interested in. Excitedly, Valerie Marvin, our Capitol historian, replied back, "I am absolutely delighted to see your email. This is the kind of message that makes my month. We are very interested in learning more." A little over 2 months later, in early August, Valerie and I, as well as Lucas and Ryan from our facilities team, rented a cube truck and made the trip down to see him in Athens, Ohio, where Chip has lived since he began working at Ohio University in 1976. While Chip had made it clear that he had some really intriguing artifacts to share with us, the main reason why we made the trip is that we wanted to meet him and we wanted to hear his story. It became clear through our email discussions leading up to the trip that Chip was very bright, he was very enthusiastic, he was very kind, and he was very, very full of stories to tell. What also made Chip so intriguing was the time period that he worked in the Capitol for the House, from the 60s to the 70s. I often refer to the 60s and 70s as the dark ages for the Capitol, in that it was kind of a poor structural state at that time, but also it's hard for us to really wrap our minds around what life was like in this Capitol that looked a lot different from what we have today. And I really wanted to ask Chip some questions about, how people perceived the building at this time. Were people sad about the state that it was in, with all these extra floors that had been added, all these extra furnishings that didn't match the Victorian style? So as well as taking a trip down to retrieve these artifacts, Valerie and I also brought a voice recorder so we could record a long oral history with Chip. The conversation went so well that half a year later, I'm still working on transcribing all of it. So we got some really, really good stories from him. Chip worked for the House clerk and led an effort to plan, organize, curate, and run the House's first proper inventory and supply. Thanks to Chip's efforts, House members and their staffs only had to make a trip down to the inventory and supply room on the ground floor of the Capitol to stock up all their office needs. Up until that point, they had to order and kind of guess and wait and see if they would get the stuff they actually needed for these offices. So this was very important work. Through his work, Chip met a lot of people, many of them becoming close friends because of his charismatic nature. Chip recalled countless names and faces that he had worked with now nearly 60 years ago, from office secretaries to legislators to technicians to sergeants. And his stories really helped bring life to an otherwise smoky, literally, historical period for the building. But as this story inclusion in this program implies, we also got some really nice artifacts from Chip as well that we brought home with us. One of them being, let me go ahead and skip ahead here. Oops, I'll skip back. You can see the photo of me, Lucas, and Ryan loading up a big glass and wooden cabinet. This belonged to Bill Chase. Bill Chase was a blind gentleman who ran a concession stand for the House Representatives in the late 60s and early 70s. This was a room off of the House chamber near the entrance, and during session hours, Bill Chase's cabinet was full of snacks and sandwiches and candy and coffee and other vital essentials that they needed at the time. Chip remembers finally that Bill Chase's concessions area is really where a lot of the work between members actually got done. During session, you could see people leaning against the cabinet, working on policy, cracking jokes with each other. What's really cool, if you look closely at the cabinet here, I think I have a better photo of it. There we are. You can still see some of the wear marks on the front of the cabinet too, with, you can imagine people leaning up against it, which is really, really cool. During one particular session in March of 1956, there was a call the House ordered, a rule in which all the members must remain seated at their desk in the chamber. The doors are barred, locked, and absent members are retrieved by the House sergeants to come to the chamber. During this call of the House, Bill Chase's stands went completely empty because they couldn't go buy snacks from him. And so as the Lansing State Journal recorded at the time, when Chase's no business plight was discovered, Representative Harry Litowich called it to the attention of the assembled House members. We can't stand idly by and let Bill suffer because our call of the House. If we don't do something quick, he's going to get stuck with a lot of stale sandwiches. After some discussion as to the legal ramifications, word was sent to the guards at the outside door to relax his vigil and let outsiders into the concessions room. Shortly, Chase's business returned to normal. The red chair in the photo next to the concessions cabinet here was a chair that was used by Representative Bill Copeland when he served as the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. So as Chip calls it, this is the chairman's chair. Both items are currently stored at our off-site storage facility, but we have hopes to one day display them and further tell their stories to all Capitol visitors. The objects also share a similar story in that they were both likely destined to be lost to the history books, that they weren't taken in and taken care of by Chip. And Chip wasn't afraid to reuse them. I don't believe he ever used the chair. But as far as Bill Chase's concessions cabinet there, Chip is a railroad history aficionado. And when we went to visit him and take the cabinet back with us, it had been full of a lot of train trinkets from over the years that he had collected as well. Oh, no. There we go. Another interesting item that Chip had for us that trip was a time clock or a punch clock from 1924. You might be able to hear it ticking away right over here next to us. Chip found the time clock tucked away in the house's underground space on the north side of the Capitol, currently where our north annex is today. This assembled into a handful of pieces. The exact use of the time clock is unknown, but the inside of the clock features a shipping label from 1924, pointing to its use by one of the state departments who occupied the Capitol at this time. Or perhaps it was even stationed inside one of the Capitol doors, and all building occupants punched their cards on this clock each and every morning. But Chip recognized the importance of it, and he took it home. He had it restored down in Holt by John Gass, who was a master clock worker down there. And he would end up taking it with him down to Athens and had it fixed up in 2014 as well in Ohio. But me and Val are happy to be able to take it back here to the Capitol. And again, like the cabinet, we're hoping to someday display it and share its story even more. And one interesting fact about the time clock, it features a label from the International Time Recording Company from 1914. This is the company that would go on to become IBM eventually too. So that's a really cool part of history. And then a couple more quick things from Chip we received. You all have the chance after the program to come up and take a closer look, but we have an old inkwell that Chip found tucked away in a cabinet in the old Supreme Court room up on floor 3 during his time. And then we also have a white spittoon, which even in Chip's day in the 60s and 70s was kind of a relic at the time. Chip said this could possibly be the last spittoon that was ever used in the Capitol itself. It was used by a house sergeant. And Chip reported that the splash from the spittoon was kind of taking a toll on the fresh white walls of the House chamber at the time. So it was forced into retirement and subsequently right into Chip's hands. So we're happy he hung on to that too. So all this to say, these are big pieces of Capitol history that we have here that we didn't have half a year ago. So we owe a lot to Chip. And I just want to say, after leaving Lansing in 1976, Chip helped found the College of Osteopathic Medicine at The Ohio University. And that's where he's still at today. We're down in Athens, Ohio. So I just want to thank him for a fantastic visit and for letting us take these artifacts back with us. And we're going to try our best to tell these stories more moving forward. Moving on. So next up in our program, we have some very large, unwieldy sets of objects from East Lansing resident and very proud Spartan, Bill Beekman. Bill currently serves as the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at MSU. And you might recognize his name. He was previously served as the university's athletic director from 2018 to 2023. He was appointed by then University President Governor John Engler. While Bill has spent his career studying and practicing law and finance, Bill has admittedly always had a true passion for politics. While he was an undergrad at James Madison College at MSU, studying justice and constitutional democracy, Bill became interested in the idea of campaigns and the strategies politicians use to get their name out into the world. It also helped that he was spending a lot of time around the Capitol, working part-time for the legislature. So that's when Bill started collecting campaign materials, flyers, handouts, speeches, mailers, anything that candidates use to promote their name and their platforms. But Bill's largest collection grew to be his stacks of campaign yard signs. Big signs, small signs, wide signs, thin signs, tall signs, short signs. Bill did his best to collect every candidate's yard sign in the greater Lansing and greater Brighton areas, as well as some signs down from Detroit as well. Presidential elections, gubernatorial elections, state house elections, county commission elections, school board elections, if it sat on a lawn and advocated for a candidate, Bill collected it. And as you can imagine, it turned into quite a physically imposing collection to store in a garage. But Bill recognized something about the collection that others might not, that they are an art form. Does the sign include the first and last name? How big is the name? The office they're running for, is it included? Motto or no motto, bright colors, patriotic colors. And plus, Bill's collection began in the 1980s, which meant it had become a visual timeline of election history of this very specific art form. But like I said, it was a big collection. Bill offered them to us as a unique political collection for the Capitol, and we accepted. We loaded them into Valerie's car. You can see a couple photos up there. Jacob and I brought them back to the Capitol, and we sorted through all the yard signs, taking a close inventory of them, over 1,000 yard signs, jotting the candidates, the time period, the position. And once we were thoroughly overwhelmed with that, we came to the decision that we should keep the signs that dealt with the Capitol and state government specifically, which was around 100 or so of them. For the rest of the signs, though, Jacob came up with an ingenious solution to further preserve the rest of the collection.
So that solution was giving them to other organizations. So what did you say? Was like 1,000 of them to begin with. We kept 100. So what do you do with 900 other basically signs that were irrelevant to us? We kept the winners, the people who worked in this building, and the earlier and future careers. So there's a boatload of Lansing signs and Ingham County signs, naturally. So those were sorted out and given to the Historical Society of Greater Lansing. So they are with the HSGL. There were a handful of signs relating to Williamston candidates. Those went to the Depot Museum in Williamston. There were a handful of Holt candidates. Those went to the Historical Society down in Holt. So we distributed those. That was maybe half of the remaining signs, and the rest of them were disposed of or done away with. So that's sort of the fate of the rest of the sign collection. So we're happy to have added those to the collection.
Thank you, Joe. You might notice we don't have any signs here. If you're interested in seeing any of these yard signs, just let us know and we'll take you back and show you our massive collection of them in our storage room. But the signs weren't the only thing Bill had to offer. In July of 1991, during the Capitol's monumental restoration project, the Michigan Capitol Committee decided to host an auction on the back parking lot of Capitol Square. At this auction, Capitol salvage was piled up, and members of the community could actually go through, sort through things, and buy them, take them home with them. In some of the pictures, you might be able to see there's the house rostrum for the 1930s all the way to the 80s. There was a spiral stair that was removed from the east wing of the fourth floor that was on sale there. Some temporary office walls from some overfloors that had been put in. But circled in yellow in one of those pictures, you might see a big black box. Bill recognized what that big black box was as one of the voting boards that had been on the walls of the House chamber from the 70s up to the 80s. The voting boards themselves might recognize they kind of look like big gymnasium scoreboards. And what's kind of fitting is that they're next to a basketball hoop in Bill's garage there. But yeah, these were actually big electronic voting boards. All 110 representatives' names were slipped into these boards on separate plaques. Next to each name was a green and red light to show how every representative was voting. And so really, when you think about it, these are priceless pieces of Capitol history. From the 70s to the 80s, these were prominent. Millions of people saw the representatives' votes going up on these boards. And to think that Bill was able to purchase these priceless pieces and bring them back home, it's really cool to think about. But we were really happy to take them off his hands because they are quite cumbersome in his garage as well. Further research though proved that these were even cooler than we had thought. The first thing I noticed about the boards is that their names were out of order from how they showed in photos from when they hung on the chamber walls. While Bill had mentioned he had contemplated giving away some of the name plaques, he never actually removed them. So some deep digging though revealed that between the time they were removed from the House chamber walls and when they were piled on the auction parking lot, they had another brief home. From September 1989 to April 1990, while the House chamber was undergoing its restoration, the House set up a temporary chamber in the Roosevelt House office building, which right across the street from it now is the Roosevelt parking lot or parking ramp that used to be the Roosevelt building where the House had all their offices at. And that's where they set up a temporary chamber. And on this next slide, you'll see some photos of that temporary chamber. A little bit different from what we have upstairs in the Capitol today. But this room was fully set up to work as a functioning chamber. It was wired with microphones, voting buttons, as well as voting boards. If these voting boards look familiar, these are the ones that were on the House chamber walls, removed in 1989, hung on these walls for just a little under a year, and then sold to Bill Beekman on the auction lot. So when we look at these photographs here of them in the temporary chamber, these name order does match from when we pick it up at Bill's garage. So this is a really unique piece of Capitol history. Since 1879, there's only been one other chamber for the House other than what they have today, and it was here in the Roosevelt office building. So we're lucky to have some pretty big pieces of that. We do have 51 of the voting councils down in the bottom right corner. You'll see as well, we have 51 of those that Bill also donated as well. So very big thank you to Bill for that. So I'll turn it back over to Jacob.
Cool. All right. Next up, we're going to talk about this riveting photo that is really splashy on the screen, a block of wood, but let's talk about it. This is the gavel block from Michigan's 1961 constitutional convention. It's on the desk over here. And this gavel block was a gift of Frederick Grassman. This was maybe a couple years at this point ago. He was a page at ConCon in 1961 and 62. And at the end of the convention, as the story goes, as he told it, people start scavenging, grabbing anything they can as souvenirs. He makes his way up to the rostrum. The gavel's gone. That probably went with the chair, right? That's sort of something that you keep as a souvenir, but the gavel block was there. So he grabs the gavel block, takes it home with him, and 60 years later, it ends up here with us. So he brings this in and donates it to us, as well as two photographs, one of President Eisenhower's address to ConCon in 1961, and a group of delegates, leadership of the delegates signed by those members. There's lots of bits and pieces of ConCon scattered across the state, and they're sort of trickling into institutional collections right around now. So we're happy to have that. And there's another piece of Constitutional Convention history sitting over here, and that is a desk, a delegate desk from ConCon and chair. So this desk came to us from the MSU Museum. And the reason it was at the MSU Museum is this desk belonged to Delegate John A. Hanna, who happened to be the president of Michigan State University. So the convention was held over at the Civic Center, which is where Constitution Hall is now, just kitty corner from here. President Hanna was elected to the 14th Senatorial District, which represented Ingham and Livingston counties. Of course, he was from East Lansing. And there were 144 delegates. Each desk was made by the Capital City Lumber Company in Lansing. They were contracted to build and install the Formica desks in the Civic Center in 1961. The chairs were supplied by the Herman Miller Company of Zeeland. So those are important, an important pair for us. Each desk has a voting button on it, a voting switch for aye, nay, and then the not voting option as well. And then if you look close at the picture and then up close later on, there are two holes in the top right corner of the desk. There were name placards that stuck in there. They all had name plates. John Hanna's is missing from this desk, unfortunately. So we don't have his name plate for this desk. But when ConCon concluded, there's that picture that Mr. Grassman gave us actually of Eisenhower's speech. But when ConCon concluded, the whole hall in the Civic Center was wiped out. And what do you do with all this furniture that was designed specifically for this purpose? Well, John Hanna wanted it. All of that ConCon furniture, the desks, the voting buttons, the voting boards, all the electronics, the rostrum, the state seal, down to the carpet, were all donated to Michigan State University and reinstalled in the brand new International Center, which was under construction at that time. They were put into a lecture hall that is pictured in the lower right corner here, and it was a recreation of the ConCon Hall. It was used as a lecture hall and a meeting room on MSU's campus for decades. Ultimately, it's broken up. I'll tell you about that in a second, but why did it end up at MSU? Well, John Hanna was a powerful man. That'll do it. He was a president of MSU and a delegate. That's a double whammy. But the other man pictured with Hanna in that lower right photograph is Stephen Nesbitt. Stephen Nesbitt was a delegate, the president of ConCon, as well as a longtime member of the State Board of Education, and after ConCon, a member of the MSU Board of Trustees. So another powerful player at MSU and ConCon, and as an active player in Michigan education. So they, as a duo, probably had a big hand in getting that set to MSU. In 1997, that room was broken up, and the plan was, and carried out by MSU's facilities team, was to offer the desks to communities, educational and historical institutions across the state that had sent a delegate to ConCon. Now, I'm hoping to someday work on a census of those desks and track them down. I know of two of them. One is sitting right here. The other one is at the Michigan History Center. They have Daisy Elliott's desk, and that was on display a few years ago. So we know of the two desks. Surely there are others kicking around out there. Naturally, when they break up the room at MSU, John Hanna's desk goes into the MSU Museum's collection. They deaccessioned it in 2018. It sat around in their storage while they figured out, this should really still be in an institutional collection. Where can we offer it to? Until, we have that connection down the street and we're able to express interest, and it made its way to us. So maybe someday we'll track down his name placard. That'd be great, because you can see him in that picture. They were on campus. They were still on the desks in that lecture hall. So that's our ConCon desk. Now I'm going to talk toss it over to Brian to tell you about another thing we got from MSU at the same time.
All right. Another acquisition from the MSU Museum, another artifact we have sitting right up here by the Concon desk, is an early 19th century Empire-style armchair, traditionally thought to have been used in Michigan's first and or second Capitol buildings. The chair was donated to the MSU, or purchased by the MSU Museum in March 1951. The chair had belonged to Florence Mann, whose picture you can see front and center up there. Florence was the daughter of Roger and Alice Mann. The Manns had come to Lansing from Hillsdale in 1876, right as the Capitol construction was wrapping up. Roger Mann, Florence's father, was a successful grocer and florist. He had no family connection to state government that we've found, which kind of brings it into a mystery of how the Manns actually ended up with the chair in the first place. In 1879, when the Capitol does open up, all the furniture in the old Capitol made its way out into the community. Perhaps Manns happened upon it through a gift. Maybe it was a purchase at the time, maybe an inheritance somewhere down the line. But without solid evidence, it can be a little scary as a museum professional to concretely tie such a lofty history to an artifact. There's nothing to really link this chair to the first Capitol other than it fits the right style and family lore. Luckily, though, our team faced this exact same quandary just a few years prior, when we were gifted an Empire-style armchair from longtime Lansing resident named Leo Foster. That chair was also thought to have been used in the early Capitols. Right away, you'll notice the similarities. The Mann chair, the MSU chair, is the one on the left. The Leo Foster chair is over on the right. You'll notice that the Foster chair on the right is upholstered with a brown upholstery. The chair on the left from the MSU Museum is a traditionally caned chair, so that's probably more historically accurate. It's not original cane on it today, but one thing you'll notice too, if you come up and take a look later on, is that the MSU chair over the years was altered a little bit. There's some pieces of wood that were kind of stuck on the armchairs or on the arms of the chair to keep them sturdy. It was also filed down a little bit, cut down a little bit at the bottom. The top of the backing was altered a little bit, but it's not hard to say that they're pretty identical. So the fact that we have these two armchairs with a family tradition behind them, both being from the first Capitol of Michigan, it's pretty safe to say that these were some of our finest Michigan relics we have today. So let's see, I have one more artifact to share with you, and then I'll turn it back over to Jacob to wrap up. A really, really cool walking stick that belonged to Governor Edwin Winans. Edwin Winans was our Michigan governor from 1891 to 1893. He was our 22nd governor. Edwin Winans was very adventurous. At the age of 25, Winans ventured from New York to California to work as a prospector in the gold rush, where he settled in the mining town of Rough and Ready, California, helped found and run a mine there for about 8 years. Business was a little tough, so after 8 years, Winans, a newly married man, moved to Michigan in 1858. Winans, once he was back in Michigan, quickly pursued a political career in Michigan. He served as a state representative during the Civil War. He served as a U.S. representative in the 1880s and eventually topped off his career as Michigan's governor in 1891. Now, a few weeks ago, January 2nd, Valerie and I traveled up to Traverse City to attend a public ceremony at the Traverse City Library, in which descendants of Governor Edwin Winans presented the Capitol a walking stick that belonged to the governor. You'll see a close-up photo in the center there. The walking stick itself is made of redwood from California's redwood forest. The stick is topped by a gold handle, which is appropriate. And then the gold handle clutches a polished nugget of gold vein quartz. This quartz is really specific to this region of California. So really priceless artifact here. The stick has stayed in the Winans family. You'll recognize, or you'll see David Winans up there holding the walking stick. David Winans, we believe, is the great nephew of Governor Edwin Winans. And then over on the right, you'll see Valerie Winans, who has kind of become the the capital historian, the family historian over the years. In fact, she recently published a book, The Extraordinary Life of Edwin B. Winans, from the Stampede for Gold in California to the capital of Michigan. The Winans walking stick has been passed down through the family. Traditionally, it was given to the oldest male. So David received it from his father and his father before that. And we're really, really happy that it ended up here in the Capitol. We just got it a couple of weeks ago, but it's kind of right at the top of our list of things that we can put on display and show off to Capitol visitors. And we're really happy that the stick made its way back to the governor's stomping grounds. There we go. So getting tired. So I'll turn it back over to Jacob here to wrap up.
All right. Thank you, Brian. One more section to go here, and that is to discuss the Craig Whitford collection. This is a biggie tonight. So this is maybe what inspired this program. This is maybe our largest, most impactful acquisition to date since we've been collecting seriously. Craig Whitford, who's pictured on the left here with Kendall Wingrove, who is one of our own docents and also involved with the Historical Society of Michigan. And Craig has been involved in local history for 40 plus years. Now, he was president of the Historical Society of Greater Lansing for nearly a decade. He currently is a member and has served for more than 20 years on the Ingham County Historical Commission and is active in numismatic and philatelic circles. Those are coins and stamps, if you're keeping track at home. And he was appointed by Governor Engler to serve on the State Quarter Commission. So he had a hand in designing our state quarter in the early 2000s. Now, Craig has also published multiple works, including one that I consider to be an authority on Lansing history entitled Lansing City on the Grand, 1836 to 1939. As well as Airport Kid Learning to Fly and Postmarked Michigan, Michigan, 1847 and 48. He was the 2020 recipient of the Ingham County Heritage Award, the 2024 recipient of the Historical Society of Michigan State History Lifetime Achievement Award. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Craig for more than a decade, as well as I know a couple others on staff here have as well. And we have been delighted to acquire just a small portion of Craig's immense collection relating to early state history, Michigan history, Lansing history, which I would and many others would classify as one of the single best collections on early Michigan and local history ever assembled. So we're thrilled to have just a portion of that here in our collection now. My favorite segment of that collection are the stereographs. And I just put 3 of the 62 that we have acquired on the screen here. Now, the stereographs, if you're not familiar with them, we're taken with a double lens camera. They take 2 photographs side by side. So when you use the viewer, which we have up here, they appear to be 3-dimensional. So that's what a stereograph is. We have 31 of the 62 interior photographs of the new state capitol, this building. They were taken in 1879, most of them by photographer J.H. Scotford on January 9th of 1879, just a week and a half after the building opened on January 1st of 79. Also included are photographs of the second capitol, which was Lansing's first, including some scarcely before seen views like the one shown on the screen of the easterly lawn, and not from the road, not from an elevated position, but just adjacent to the building. This is a view that's not seen very often. As well as construction photos like this famous photo of the Capitol's cornerstone laying on top. Even though it's well published and well known, it's an amazing photograph. We're thrilled to have an original of it in the collection. That iconic view with Mason Eben McPhee perched on top, chiseling out the time capsule slot that wasn't quite big enough. Now, also in the collection are photographs of governors, several governors, including Alpheus Felch and his wife. We have these photos up here for afterward. Governors Kim Ziegler, Harry Kelly, and others, including an extensive series of personal photographs from Governor Alex Groesbeck. So you'll see like a studio portrait of him on the right side. On the bottom, that's him sitting on the right on a boat. There are professional photos of him at meetings overseas. It's a great set of photos of Governor Groesbeck, who is an interesting character, an interesting person. So these will make a great set to tell a story of Governor Groesbeck with. Also, photographs of dignitary visits. Those like James Cox, who was a presidential nominee in 1920, who visited and addressed on the Capitol lawn. Got General Douglas MacArthur's visit in the 1950s, as well as Lansing whistle stops by two presidents, Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman, which were not many photographs of those stops kicking around out there. So we're thrilled to have those, as well as photos of the 1937 Lansing Labor Holiday, in which protesters filled the streets demonstrating about the unionization of the Lansing labor force. So lots of things that happened around the Capitol and events and politically related things. Another subset, well, we have the stereographs, we have photographs. We also have a Teddy Roosevelt collection that has come in as part of this Whitford collection. So Teddy Roosevelt visits in 1907, notably one of only two sitting presidents to visit us here at the Capitol, the other being Bill Clinton in 1997. And this is a great set of materials. So on the left, you have two badges that one is green and white naturally because Teddy visits to commemorate MAC's 50th anniversary in 1907. So that name on top, Rush Snow 11, haven't investigated it, I think is a student's name probably. And then 11 would have been the graduating year. So he would have been an underclassman in 1907 when the president visited. The medallion at the bottom, that is an image of College Hall, which was the first academic building on campus. So these are important pieces. The souvenir is probably something that was sold. Also included, one of my favorite pieces on the bottom right is a panoramic view of President Roosevelt's address to the commencement in 1907 at MAC, taken on what is now Adams Field, was Landon Field, was the old drill field and North Campus. You can see that almost covered white spot on the left-hand side, the president standing right under that. That's the stage, and then all the graduates seated in front of him, and then the whole crowd gathered out there on that field. So that's a great photograph, one of my favorites. We also have a great series of postcards. There's the souvenir postcards that were probably sold on the street corner, like the one in the upper right, D-lighted, about President Roosevelt in town. And then the one on the left is an example of an array of snapshot real photo postcards that were taken on that day in the surrounding days of the Capitol's decoration, covered with flags and buntings, and the parade. Of course, he quite famously parades down Michigan Avenue, one way in a Rio, the other way in an Olds, to make both of the auto manufacturers happy in town. So there's photos of that. A great set of postcards and real photo postcards. So this is an amazing collection of one of our most famous moments, one of our most famous visitors. We also have souvenirs, and ribbons were a huge souvenir in the late 19th century and early 20th century. So here's a sampling of some of the ribbons in the collection. Some of them are political, like this Aaron Bliss for Governor ribbon. This is something that was popular in the late 19th century before the political button comes into being, and right around 1895, 96. Now, of course, he's governor after that, so it hangs over a little bit. You'll oftentimes see them paired together with a pin and then a ribbon under it in the early 20th century. So there's the political ones. There's also the event ones. So we have things like the memorial service for President Grant when he dies, the reunions like the Michigan Legislative Association, all that, those kinds of souvenirs from events and happenings around the building. We have major events like this ribbon from the Blair statue unveiling, which is pretty great in 1898. We're building quite a little collection of material related to the Blair Monument in the last couple of years as well. And then this fantastic oversized ribbon from Admiral Dewey's visit in 1900, which is pretty fantastic, with that portrait of him on it. So those are great souvenirs that were really ephemeral, probably things that were not intended to survive, but have. And we're thrilled to have added those as well. Coins are something maybe we didn't expect to have ever been collecting, but these are fun Capitol-related coins. If you look close, you might recognize a face on there. On the left, and both of them on the left, is Governor Frank Murphy. Now, Governor Murphy, who was here in the late 1930s, happened to have been Governor General of the Philippines, and this is a peso and a 50 centavo, maybe saying that correctly, from the Philippines. And he was on the currency alongside in profile Manuel Quezon, who was president of the Philippines. So that is who we have pictured on those two 1936 coins, which are uncirculated and excellent, very exciting pieces of the Whitford collection. We pulled those out for you tonight too. And the last huge chunk of the Whitford collection are autographs and signatures of a slew of governors. Let's tell you who we have. There are 38 governors included in this set, including everyone from Stevens T. Mason through George Romney, except for just a handful. The ones that are not represented there are William Greenlee, Moses Wisner, Alex Grossbeck, and Wilbur Brucker, which are in a couple instances represented elsewhere in the collection, but it's nearly a complete run for a huge chunk of our history. We pulled a couple of them out up here, and there are a few standouts. Not all of them are just these really fancy executive letterhead that we love, the stationery from the executive office. This one with the state seal and Governor Crapo signature, fantastic. But there are some standouts aside from these. We have a signed photograph of Governor Kelly and Governor Siegler. The Kelly one is pulled out up here. A set of materials related to the Ferris Institute, signed by Governor Ferris. That's now Ferris State University, of course, which he founded. And one of the crowning jewels of this set is also pulled out up here, and that's in July 1st, 1861 Michigan War Loan, signed by Governor Austin Blair, with 46 of the attached coupons still at the bottom of it, which you can check out up here up front. So an amazing set. It allows us to not only see their autograph, their hand, but to see the documents they're signing. Is it just their autograph? Is it a check from Governor Comstock's construction company? It's an amazing set of documents. So we're thrilled to be able to use those to illustrate and tell the story of these men who ran the state for more than a century, as we have represented here. Now we're thrilled to be taking right on time any questions that you might have about anything we've talked about tonight. Andrew.
Yeah, about the Craig Whitburn collection.
Yeah.
Will any of those items be available to the public online?
Of course, yeah. So that's a work in progress. There's been a trickling of things online on our collections website, maybe a dozen, 24 things so far online, but eventually we'll get most of it up online. So
I'll have to ask you for the address.
absolutely, you can go to our website and navigate to find it there, but we also post links periodically on social media, but we can send it to you directly too.
I thought photographs of the Hampton's first capital,
Mm-hmm.
and you say you have photographs of the first week of the second capital.
Of the current capital, yeah.
Yeah, interior.
Yeah. They're amazing. Yeah, it's my favorite set of photographs. Yeah, favorite photographer too. Any other questions, Karen?
How are you archiving?
Yeah, great questions. Like how are we archiving the digital photos? You're thinking about the legislative collection I talked about first. So they are presently, well, we have 2 servers on different physical locations, and they are on both of them backed up routinely. So if one is struck by a car, it's still on the other one. So that's the idea of being able to have multiple copies of it, as well as not digging into them and having sort of a preserved version of it and then a use version of it as well. So doing what we can with what we have here. Good question. Any others? Yes.
So Chip kind of gives you information about back in the 70s, so there's a couple of different, but was he able to visit after those ones were taken down? And did he kind of fill you in on what kind of a depression it like to be at that time?
Yeah, as far as we know, Chip has not made it back to the Capitol. But what was really interesting about Chip is that he's a total people person, and large majority of his stories focus on the people he worked with, the friends that he made, a lot of the characters that he interacted with on a day-to-day basis. So as far as questions about the Capitol itself and some of these alterations going on around him and some of the fear in the newspapers of the Capitol about to burn down, it's about to fall apart and stuff like that, Chip honestly was kind of unaware of all that going on. So I think all these overflows and modifications happening around Capitol employees at the time, I think they did a really good job of just adjusting to it. They were so focused on getting their work done and working with the peers around them that, that maybe it wasn't such a bad situation as the newspapers all made it out to be at the time. So yeah, fantastic question. Yes.
Well, when I got maybe 75,
half floors were still there, I remember them well. And they were terrible.
Hmm.
They were, you had to leave. Peanuts behind you and you way around, they were death traps.
Yeah.
The service bureau was on the fourth floor of Capitol, all crammed together. And, yeah, it was not good.
Yeah.
It looked terrible from the outside. Because all the beautiful windows are all cut off half. Yeah, so the renovation was great, except I lost my parking spot. Capitol, right where the driveway for all the. They got me another.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not a good place. Yeah, there had been any fire.
Yeah.
Would have been a disaster.
Yeah, that's one big part of the sixties and seventies as they're building all these attic spaces with hundreds of staff working in these little cram spaces. Their fire safety was the biggest concern. Not a lot of fire alarms in those attic spaces and not a lot of egresses. Once you're in a so if everybody knows what an overfloor is, so it's 22-foot high ceilings. Starting in the late sixties, they start dividing these spaces into a bottom half and top half. So for folks working in the top half, the only way out of that office is to go down a stair to the bottom half. So only one exit for large majority of these spaces. About 75% of the rooms in the Capitol were overfloored. So
Find it up.
yeah, if you could find the offices, yeah. So yeah, it was a complicated time, right? So that's why we're trying to get as many stories as we can about it, so we can peer into that window of history, because even though it goes totally against this beautiful Victorian monument to have this totally modified modern era style, modifications to the building, it's a big part of the Capitol history. We had overfloors for roughly about 40 years or so. So it's a story that's worth investigating and telling some more too. So thank you very much. Any other questions? No? Well, I think I'll wrap it up there, or we'll wrap it up there. We'll turn the lights on and feel free to come on up, and me and Jacob can tell you some more for our folks who watch online. Thank you so much for tuning in, and yeah, everybody have a good night. Thanks. Yeah.